So are you just tired of playing Pokemon all the time and wanting to get that monster RPG fix out of you? Well, we got Cassette Beasts now, which is honestly a really nice replacement for it. Because it takes the whole standard tradition of, oh, monster fight monster. You literally become the monster, alright? Let me tell you. But before I get a little too ahead of myself, let's rewind a bit. I'm going to show you the start of the game roughly, bits and pieces, just to give you a general idea. But yeah, the whole thing is, you get washed up on an island, and your main objective is just to go home. Simple, but without spoiling too much, you end up fighting the equivalent of gym leaders, which are captains in this game, and they're all across the island. Oh, and maybe there's some extraplanar high-powered beings that you may have to deal with if you want to get home. But sometimes that is what it is, and it's just par for the course. Especially for any, JRPG if you're familiar with it. At face value, it's 2v2 typically, with you and a partner against two monsters, which sometimes it might be one depending on how it pops up. But it gets more complicated, because what happens is, not only is there the fusion mechanic which you get after a certain point really early on in the story, there's more layers and depth to it. Compared to the type weakness gameplay that you'd see in Pokemon where it's rock, paper, scissors, Cassette Beasts sorta takes it, says no, and then flips it on its head. Currently, there's 13 types, technically 14 if you count the one that'll turn you whatever type you hit it with. It's basically Kecleon's color change if you remember that one. And while Pokemon has some moves that might change either an opponent's or user's type or something like that, this game has it where it will affect everything. And there's a move for each type. Let that sink in for a minute. Because depending on what you do, not only is there a type differential damage bonus, but there's also buffs or debuffs that can be inflicted. You use fire on, let's say, a water type, it's going to create steam that's going to end up healing them. Take that same fire type move, use it on a plastic type, which, yes, it exists, believe it or not. It's going to end up melting it, creating toxic fumes, and turn it into a poison type, which then it's going to change the whole type differential game at that point. And you remember shinies where all they did was change the color palette for them? They got their equivalent in this game too. They're called bootlegs, except they have more of mechanical changes where they're a different type. That can change up the entire ball game for you, depending on what you might find. And trying to swap moves between different beasts and everything is a lot easier when you take into account that they're stickers, and you can just swap whatever you want to do. If you want to take something off of one and throw it on another, you can do that. And the closest we've gotten to that in any Pokemon game is Legends Arceus, and that didn't stick around, unfortunately. Now, what the trailers might not have shown is that in order to fuse, you need to build up a fusion bar, and you can only do it with your companions, and you can only do it with them once you've gotten to know them better, and that usually involves a boss fight of sorts. And let me tell you, the boss fights are actually really fun, because I actually had to sit there and think for a moment, look at what they were doing and go, oh, that's the route we're taking this. Okay. The first one, simple enough, try not to die. It's when you get to the other ones where they have certain patterns about them, and once you pick up on it, it just becomes so much easier. What really makes each companion interesting is that they have their own stories about them. You actually follow along their personal missions along your main quest to get out of here. Everyone's different and have things that they're, not afraid to tell you about once you get to know them better. And the thing is, when getting to know these companions, you actually get to know them, and they come off as being extremely likable even through their faults. Because the thing is, no one's just a trope, they're all different people, and that's what makes it really interesting. Oh, and before I forget, there's no HMs really in this game. You gain abilities by catching monsters themselves. That means you don't have to carry one person in your party slot that holds all the moves you need to get around places. You learn them yourself, which is one of the biggest improvements. I cannot overstate that enough. Now, if the name itself hasn't tipped you onto it, Cassette Beast is heavily inspired by retro influences. And I'm not just saying by looking at the achievement names. I mean cassette tapes themselves, some of the distortion that occurs during certain moments, reminiscent of a VHS tape. It brings you back to those sort of feel-good times. Oh, and they also mention the fashion sense, which, yeah, that'll do it. The pixel art brings you back to when that's all games used to be, is just a collection of pixels. And the soundtrack is an absolute banger, let me tell you. Because when that first boss fight music kicks in, it goes hard. It goes so well. And I think it's worth mentioning that when you fuse with your companion, the track suddenly gets vocals. It's so good. Because you could even do it just during a standard fight that you've heard 1,000 times, and then you fuse in for the first time on it, and all of a sudden, you got lyrics? You got vocals going? It's like a whole new experience. I don't know how to describe it otherwise. And one more thing, before I forget it. The bestiary, which is the equivalent of your Pokedex, once you reach 5 stars with the beast before you have to evolve it or worry about it, it gives you real-life references as to what it's referencing. So there's literally a thing called Spring Heel. It's based off of Spring Heel Jack. If you know that, you know, but if you don't know, guess what? You learned something new out of it, and it's just fun to learn where some of these things are referencing from. As of this video, they're still doing updates to the game. They just released update 1.2, which added a few new monsters to the mix along with a new area, and we're already getting a sneak peek at some of the DLC that's coming out for it. So, long story short, yeah, I tell you to go get the game, so hurry up already with that, why don't you? And don't forget, guys, to like, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. But I'll be seeing y'all soon, so take care, okay? Bye. Also, before I forget, tell me in the comments, who's your favorite companion? And why is it Meredith?